Hey everyone, Norm from Tested here, and welcome back to another model making project. Now, first of all, thank you so much for all your positive feedback and kind words with regard to my Star Wars inspired Book Nook diorama that we recently shared. It's been really fun to see some of you learn about Book Nooks and that style of diorama, which I'm totally obsessed with. And some of you have even said that it's inspired you to take up miniatures and model making while we're all working from home during this lockdown period. Hopefully that's the case. Now, to help those of you get started, today's model making project is another diorama, but it's going to be a much simpler design, something that's more accessible, and especially if you have access to a laser cutter like a Glowforge or a vinyl cutter like the Cricut Maker, or if you even want to cut out the patterns by hand on cardboard or styrofoam, that's all possible. The design for these is the SVG files are all available in the description below. I've uploaded them to Thingiverse, so you can go ahead, click that, download them now, and follow along as we build this version of the Death Star hallway. And that's what we're building today, because as I was working on that book nook and finished up that top hallway, which I was very, very proud of, I was also struggling to figure out how I was going to design that detention center hallway on the lower level. And while procrastinating on that design process, I decided to just go through the process of making another diorama design. Boot up Illustrator, and this time my parameters were, let's not use so much acrylic and so much material. I mean, that book nook is almost 10 sheets of material. It can add up in cost. I wanted to come up with something that really would fit one sheet of acrylic that Glowforge sells. So I've talked about this before. This is that matte black on one side and glossy black on the other acrylic. It's 12 inches by 20 inches. And on a laser cutter like Glowforge, there's a bit of a margin that you can't cut. So you really have a little bit less of that in terms of usable space. And so I wanted to come up with a project that really fit all the designs onto at most one sheet. And I've come up with a diorama that's basically three-sided. So it's the floor, the back wall with room for some lights, as well as a side wall, which lets you display these Hasbro figures, 1/18th scale, on basically this almost isometric view diorama. I love this scale, 3.75 inches, 1/18 scale. You can find these Star Wars Black Series ones, at your local toy store or even eBay. These were the Vintage Series ones that were released with the Rogue One, and they do Stormtroopers all the time. They have ones for the Mandalorian, for example, and they're really posable. I find them really fun. So again, the materials are one sheet of the matte black on one side, glossy black on the other side. Also need some frosted acrylic, and not a lot is needed, so I just have some scrap here. Really just need like about a 6-inch by 4-inch piece, as well as some black styrene, which we'll use for that relief. So let's go walk through the process. I've already done the design. I'm going to show you some of that in Illustrator, but we're going to head over to the laser cutter and get our pieces cut out. Alrighty, so we have our pieces cut out, and what was important about this process is, as you can tell, there are different sides I use to that black acrylic. So this brown side here, this is the matte black side, and so while everything was designed as if it was going to be on one sheet, I actually had to do two cut passes. The first cut pass with the matte black on top to get the sides, like this is very clearly the backboard with the windows, as well as your pattern here on the walls. But I wanted the glossy side for the floor. That kind of mirror finish was really effective in the book nook. So then I had to flip over that acrylic sheet, make sure you're not cutting into space that you've already carved out of, and then cut out the baseboard. And so I've done some test fitting off camera. What's also important is that the files I've released are without any kerf. So I've added some additional kerf that's just done if you use Illustrator by adding a path offset. For me, on the Glowforge, I found that 0.007 inches works really well. You don't need to do it on both every piece, just need to do it on basically the ones that slot into the holes here. And as you can tell, it press fits pretty well. I haven't done the peeling off of the protective material. So to give you a sense of how it's all going to come together, this is that baseboard. The floor pattern here shows you exactly how much floor space. And if we do just kind of a test placement, yeah, plenty of space right here for a figure. And then this is the back wall, the backdrop, really. As you can tell, there's extra space here because I'll be installing lights. On the back there. So a little bit of a 1/2 inch gap for the lights to go through. Made sure I designed a hole to be cut out for the power. And then that gets interlocked with the third wall, which is this doorway. So it's again slot joints. So I can show you that test fit here that holds this corner together. Both of those get slotted into their respective spots. And I also have just a little bit of bookending, a small panel here on the outside wall, as well as a little bit of a ceiling to block that light bleed. So it should be pretty self-contained. One of the other things I decided to do was also have the floor raised. And so it gives a little bit of an elevated look, a little bit of a floating look. And so as you can tell on these walls, it's about 1/2 inch protruded. And so while this is only about an 1/8 inch thick, it should stand above whatever surface you're displaying it on. Also took the time to cut out my frosted acrylic. And for that, I basically have my inserts. And so these pieces get press fit into the windows. And so you can see, it's not a perfect fit. So I may have to use a little bit of glue to get them into place, but they don't fall out super easily. And then I double back that with another piece of frosted acrylic that goes behind. And then the LED light strip goes behind that. So I'm pretty happy with how these pieces are looking and how they're fitting. Pretty confident about that. And so I'm going to now take off all of the protective backing minus the floorboards. I want to do that at the very end because I don't want to get any fingerprint smudges on here. And then we can start putting things together. Now, this is one of those parts of laser cutter projects that I find just so satisfying and relaxing to do, and that's the peeling off of the protective material. Now, I used to do this all with my fingernails, and that certainly is a fast way to do it for the big sheets. But I've also found a liking to using a tool to help peel off, especially some of the small pieces. And what I'm using here, I think this is a machinist scribe or scriber. It's just a metal hand tool, almost like the handle of an X-Acto blade, but it has a pointed tip at the end as opposed to a blade. And some of them are double-sided with a hook on the other side, almost like a dental probing tool, which could be great for picking off and scraping off some of this really small protective sheet. One thing I've started to do with these laser cutter designs is, as much as possible, make the pieces symmetrical. And that way, I have the option of choosing for a two-sided material like this acrylic, whether I want to use the matte side or the glossy side. Or it saves me a hassle when I have to make matching pieces that are chiral. I can cut them in one pass as opposed to having to flip the sheet over if I want the same finish on both sides. All right, I've peeled off the pieces, and while I said that I do take great satisfaction in that peeling off process, there is a limit to that. And in building the book nook, one of the parts that ended up being a little bit frustrating was the peeling and removal of all the pieces for my frosted acrylic. And so one of my lessons learned is that you can actually, for frosted acrylic, it doesn't matter if you remove that protective covering first and then do your laser cutting. It does for your finished pieces of acrylic because that can mar the plastic. But here, the edges still look pretty clean and they still fit perfectly, and it saves me, well, for this one, let's see, there's 6, 8, 48 of these pieces, some of them really tiny, both sides, almost 100 little pieces of paper that I would have had to peel off if I had not just removed that from the beginning before laser cutting. Now, before I start piecing things together, I want to do more work on this back wall piece. This is where a lot of that visual accent is going to be. I'm going to start applying some of these frosted pieces on. And even with frosted acrylic, one thing to note is it's actually only frosted on one side, not both sides. The frosting itself is a little bit of a marring of the surface. And so for consistency, make sure you have that frosted side on top and not behind, or else it'll look inconsistent. Hopefully I won't get that wrong here. I'm also gonna affix the backing pieces here. And for that, I have two types of cement. I got really useful thin acrylic or Tamiya extra thin cement for use on Gundam. This works great on styrene, and we're going to use that for our styrene. And then some stronger stuff, acrylic cement. This is pretty powerful stuff. It basically welds the acrylic together, makes them, fuses them into one piece. And oh, the T on my cement is worn off. That's not good, but really powerful stuff. We're also going to apply some styrene. So while the etch here, the pattern here looks all right. And if I wanted to do this, you can get away with this being the back wall. It still reads as that classic surface. It doesn't give me as much of dimensional relief as I wanted to. And so I've really come to love using this black polystyrene sheets. This is 0.02 inches thick, and it cuts so well on a vinyl cutter. I've learned to adjust my settings on my Cricut Maker to do basically 3 passes. And when that comes out of the cutter, the pieces are still affixed to the sheet. And so it's actually useful for a couple reasons. One, I'm not individually picking off the pieces off of the mat, and I can pop them off one at a time. So if I'm ready to pop them off, really it's just folding it a little bit, and then really the pieces pop off almost perfectly. And also it lets me add some extra etch details. And so you can see on these bars here, for example, I'm not going to actually pop those out of the styrene. I'm going to leave that on the styrene, and it's basically free etch detail. It's almost like the scoring detail you get on a laser cutter, except it's done with a knife, and then that saves me a lot of work while still retaining some of that fidelity. So peeling this off next, gonna apply that to the backing board, and then also get my acrylic, my frosted acrylic inlaid, and this is gonna look awesome next time we check in. And it was almost perfect. As you can see, it's frosted on 47 out of the 48 pieces. This one I messed up on. I got the clear side up, frosted side down. Now, I end up using the acrylic cement on both this and also the backing. Really powerful stuff, toxic stuff. That's why I use gloves, and really a drop is all you need. A drop is almost too much. Even with this dispenser, very carefully drop them into the recesses, place the piece, and now this is all bonded together. Next up, we're going to do our styrene, and this one I will use the Tamiya plastic cement. Popping out these pieces, super simple. I only have one big wall panel here to do. And so basically the process is pop out the pieces, apply a little bit of the Tamiya. And for the styrene, the way it pops out, there is, I've noticed, a kind of top side and a bottom side. You want to keep the side that was cut on the top because it's a cleaner edge. On the bottom, it may be it's a little bit rougher. You can smooth it out with your fingernail a little bit, but it looks nicer as a panel on the top. So keep that distinct. And so I'm actually thinking, yeah, do I want these on there? Yeah, we'll place these on and let's get started. All right, we're almost done. So this back wall piece is looking pretty good, actually, with all that extra layers of acrylic plus styrene. Like this feels like and looks like a real thing. I just love that black styrene. It cuts so nicely, applies super easily with this thin cement, and the final thing we're about to do before we put it all together is, of course, add the LED lights to this backing plate. And I think I'm going to apply it to the glossy side of the plate. Allows a little bit more of the light bounce on the inside, so that gets sandwiched right here, like so. And then on the back side, then it has nice matte finish on the outside. And for LED lights, super cheap. You can find them online. I have a lot of, basically warm white, cool light. This is cool light. And you can buy these. It's almost like less than $1 a foot. You buy them 16.4 feet for about $14, $15 shipped. And I don't need all 16 feet. In fact, I don't even have that here because this is some leftover from a past project. So it's unprotected LED light strips, doesn't have that rubber coating, does have adhesive backing. They say 3M. Who knows if it's actually 3M or not? But I will just unravel this whole thing and kind of measure out how much I think I might need and then snip the rest. And then you can also then buy basically a pack of what you would then connect to the LEDs, which are these things. So this is just an easy snap-on plug, no soldering required. Wherever you snip the LEDs, right alongside where you see those exposed contact points, you then clip that on and you plug into power. And in fact, the power supply sometimes is the most expensive part. You get them bundled. You can even get the adjustable dimmable switch bundled with the full strip. But if you want to buy a pack of power supplies, that can add up. These are super cheap, and the strips themselves are super cheap. So let's take a look and see how much we think we'll need. Of course, I'm going to use this light as a guide. A little bit of LED goes a long way. So here, about 3 windows wide, I think I'm only going to need basically one layer of LEDs. I can start there. Imagine it's going to be like so. It's going to fold over, and then it's going to maybe bend around like so, and then curl up. And then actually, I'll probably go the other direction. Just, yeah, and then come back down. Yeah. So not that much at all. If this looks like it's about, yeah, it's going to be like 6 inches, then I'm going to need maybe 2 feet of this at most. Snip that off, and then let's get to applying that to our backing. Yay! Our lights work, and it is now time for the final assembly. So Gonna get my base plate right here, which I know still has that last bit of covering. That's my very, very last step, is gonna be peeling these off. And then the way I have this design, I actually have these boards going in first. Press fit, no glue required. That is a pretty solid and pretty close fit right there. Very happy with that. Happy in a sense that not I would rather actually it be too small than too big of a fit, because if it's too big, then there's no way I got to recut another piece. Too small, at least I can then acrylic cement it all. But this is a very, very good fit. All right. And even if there's a little bit of wiggle room, that all works out at the end when I bracket everything together. So let's slot that in as well. Ooh, that's a good sound. It's not the sound of snapping acrylic. It's the sound of pieces snapping together. All right, let's get the third wall in as well. Now this is when I have multiple interlocking pieces that the tolerances really start to matter. Oh, that sounds good. And this outer piece goes on like so. Another good snapping sound. And then the top piece. Yes, 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 yes. Let's not turn it all on yet. I'm gonna now take this time to finally remove the floor covering. This is the final touch. And then we're gonna turn it all on, but it's looking very promising indeed. And we are done. This looks so good. I'm so pleased with just how simple this is. One final thing that I thought I was going to be clever. So I found these. These are small little, I think, steel or metal plates with adhesive backing. And these are sold to be put on the back of phones. So you can put a phone on some type of magnetic mount or something, or some case or some charger. But they're really cheap, and I was wondering, could I actually tape these to the bottom of my platform? So, for example, if I just peel this back and stick it on, right, let's say right here, then I have essentially a piece of metal underneath, which then I could use a magnet and it would stick on. And so the idea is these figures actually have a little bit of a hole in them because they originally were made to be pegged onto some type of display stand, right? And so these holes they're really small. They're only about 2 millimeters wide in diameter, about maybe 3 or 4 millimeters tall. And I look see if I can find magnets that I can then embed into the soles of these figures so that they would stay in place. And I did find some 2 millimeter by 1 millimeter magnets, and I did a test of super gluing those into the soles of the stormtrooper. But as you can see, it doesn't really stay on the platform. At least it's not strong enough. The magnets aren't strong enough to go through the 1/8 inch acrylic and then onto attached to the metal plate. So if you are aware of a place where I can get some really strong but really small 2 millimeter diameter magnets, I'd love to know. Please let me know in the comments so I can try this idea of embedding them into the feet and having them affixed in place. But let's get Vader and his spot right here with that glossy floor. I'm going to angle it a little bit so you get that isometric look. Something I really love about this, the raised floor. So gives a nice shadow for display purposes, and it's actually just only it's being held up on two sides, but it's enough that it has that little elevated look to it. And then I'm going to plug in the lights, and there you go. That is a very simple Star Wars inspired Death Star hallway diorama that you can make at home with designs again in the description below. I think I'm Imperial hallwayed out. This is probably the last of those projects I'm going to do using this design. I'm going to move on to the next project, but it's been a ton of fun. I've learned a lot in the process of iterating on this at different scales, different levels of complexity. Uh, and hope you've enjoyed following me on that journey as well. I'd love to see you take this design and do whatever you want with it, riff on it, and show me what you make in the comments or on social media. But we'll be back next time with more projects, more model making, and thank you again for watching. I'm Norm, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much for watching that entire video. Your viewing helps us keep the lights on. Well, it's one of the ways. One of the other ways is through selling our merch. And you guys have been so fabulous about suggesting great merch ideas when I say something strange or funny, and you suggest in the comments that we put it on a sticker or we put it on a t-shirt. Well, we are following your advice. And if you follow the links below, you can buy some of our merch so that we can make some more videos. Thank you guys for watching.